We're back with my next guest. He's the investigative journalist behind a new opinion piece this morning published in The Hill. It is titled "The Case for Russia Collusion Against the Democrats." Joining me right now is John Solomon. And John, it is good to have you on the program this morning. You've done excellent work on this story, we know, for the last 2 years. I'm going to get to your new op-ed in a moment, but give me a reaction to what we just heard from Senator Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, great interview. You pinned him down on something that we've all been trying to find out. Who is he going to subpoena? He mentioned a bunch of names, including everybody, James Comey, and the entire gang that signed the FISA. That's very important news. One name I didn't hear, but I'm curious to see if he will be Christopher Steele, the author of the dossier. I think that would be an interesting turn of events.
And he said whoever signed that FISA warrant that was done 4 times, that has to include Rod Rosenstein and Sally Yates to get subpoenaed.
Absolutely. That's big news. I agree.
What are you hearing about Michael Horowitz? The Inspector General is also working on this side-by-side track to Lindsey Graham, as he put it. What are you hearing there?
He's a great investigator. By all accounts of the people who've been involved, he's been doing a very thorough review of this FISA case. And what I'm hearing is sometime between April and June, July timeframe, he'll release his findings, and I would expect that those are essential to this entire narrative, and we're going to learn a lot more facts that are already out there. I mean, Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, Devin Nunes have done a great job getting some of this information out, but there's still a lot of dark, dirty secrets that we don't know about what went on behind the scenes at the FBI.
Well, we know that they went to the FISA court and did not give all of the information about the dossier. So they did not tell the court that, in fact, Hillary Clinton and the Democrats paid for it, and it was all political opposition research, as opposed to some real informative report. It was actually salacious and unverified, as Jim Comey said himself. So in terms of the catalysts on this, are we ever going to get accountability? Because if you hear Adam Schiff and the Democrats on the Intel Committee talk about this, and Jerry Nadler, they're focused on a whole host of other investigations about President Trump's tax returns.
Yeah, and there's no doubt. The accountability is going to have to come from the Senate, where the Republicans have that committee. The Judiciary Committee has to come from the president, who can declassify all those FISA documents. I think the release of those documents will show how much exculpatory evidence the FBI had about Trump not colluding that it didn't tell the court, and that will make this an even more serious matter. But I think it's going to have to come for those. And then, of course, the IG and the new Attorney General, Bill Barr, who's the new sheriff in town soon and has the ability to start holding people to account, something that Rod Rosenstein doesn't seem to have done during his tenure.
John, you're breaking some news this morning in your new opinion piece about collusion and the Democrats. I want to take a short break on that note. I want to come back, and I want you to list for us where you have found collusion between the Democrats and the Russians, and whether or not we'll see accountability there. We're back with John Solomon, investigative reporter. And John, tell us about your new op-ed out this morning.
Yep, so I have a new article out that identifies more than a dozen instances in which Democratic players in the Russia scandal had contact with Russians, and I'll just use one good example. A lot of people don't know this, but Christopher Steele's primary source for all the evidence that he put in the dossier, gave to the FBI, was a retired Russian intelligence operative. Very important for people to know. He took information from Russia as a foreign agent himself, a Brit, gave it to the FBI. The FBI gave it to the court, even though it was unverified, and that's how we launched this investigation. So the article goes through a dozen of those sort of contacts, and what you're seeing as the evidence of Russia collusion by Donald Trump wanes and dissolves into what it was, a political dirty trick. The evidence of the Democrats working the Russians to influence the election is starting to grow.
I understand that. Then why is it that the Democrats have been so successful in this narrative of Donald Trump has dealt with the Russians?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of media hysteria. Let's go back to the early 2017 period. All those front page stories in the Washington Post and New York Times, CNN. I think we'll look back at history and look at those and see a lot of those were false or misleading, overstated, and the evidence that was being leaked to them actually was uncorroborated at the time, and that got that hysteria going. It gave the Democrats a wonderful platform to launch their investigations. But now we have the benefit of time, and as we learn more and more information, we see it for what it was. It was a political dirty trick designed to harm the election and to delegitimize President Trump after the election.
Your piece also goes back to talk about the Skolkovo project. I remember this project because I was covering it as well back in the day, in the early 2000s, when Russia wanted to become the new Silicon Valley. And they were encouraging American companies to go and share information there.
That's right.
And you say that Hillary Clinton was involved.
She was. In fact, she was the driving force in the United States. She invited Medvedev to come to the United States and visit Silicon Valley. She arranged for several executives to go over and start sharing information with the Russians.
What information were they sharing? You're saying this was a national security issue.
It was, absolutely. And I think what ends up happening is a few years later, both the United States military and the FBI counterintelligence division raised warnings that this Skolkovo was actually used by the Russians to bleed information of our best technology, our best military technology. So something that sounded good got Clinton Foundation donors involved. At the end of the day, it became a threat to national security, something very similar to what we heard in Uranium One. And so these are areas that the Republicans haven't fully investigated, but perhaps in 2019 they'll come to light.
All right, we will leave it there. John Solomon, it's good to see you this morning, sir. Thanks so much.
And joining me now to discuss my opening statement and so much more, Trump 2020 senior advisor, Lara Trump. Good evening, Laura.
That was quite an open, Judge Janine. I loved it.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate it. You know, Laura, as you sat there and I saw you in the gallery, and you watched as your father-in-law, the president, discuss things that any right-thinking person, American or not, would be in support of, whether it's trying to get rid of, childhood cancer, which has been something that your husband, Eric, has been involved in since I think he was 20 years old. I mean, did you sit there stunned when you realized that it was so anti-Trump, that group, that they couldn't even applaud or stand up?
Well, but this is what these people have done forever. What has happened in this country is that the left would rather see the country fail than see the president succeed. So they don't want to stand for anything that he's saying, whether or not it makes sense and the rest of the country is behind him. I thought it was appalling. I thought it was shocking. First of all, let me say, of all the speeches I have ever heard my father-in-law give, I thought that State of the Union was the absolute best I have ever heard. And by the way, to get the entire group of people in that chamber up on their feet shouting USA, USA at one point, no one but Donald Trump could do that. But honestly, it was really shocking to see the number of people who did not react at moments like you are talking about, when a little girl from St. Jude who has battled cancer was there in their presence, when so many of the things you just outlined were said and they sat down and they wanted nothing to do with it, only because it came from this president. It's really appalling.
It is appalling and it's shocking. And I believe there was a CBS poll that said 76% of Americans thought the speech was a great speech. So, I mean, your relationship to the president has nothing to do with the fact that so many people thought the same thing about the speech. But, when the sex trafficking that the Democrats seem to be so interested in, the human trafficking, in stopping, seems not to be an issue. And, the left is not caring about issues that are almost issues that they were the first to talk about. It has to make Americans feel like they don't really care about us. They're more interested in their own power. It's not even about the left and the right. It's about the people versus the people in Congress.
Yeah, and you see so much of this. You saw the president, by the way, during the government shutdown, offering something that the Democrats a year ago said they couldn't live without. Let's take care of the DACA recipients. They didn't even come to the White House to sit down and negotiate with him because, Janine, as you're saying, they don't even care. It's all about a power play for them. That's all you're seeing. The good news is that the president is fighting every single day for the American people. He understands the right thing to do for this country. These same people, they are such hypocrites. A couple of years ago, under a different president, were all for a wall, all for border security. And now again, this president proposes it and they have to be against it. It's lunacy, and I think the American people are smarter than that, and I think they're seeing through it.
When the president made this statement about socialism, and he said we will never be a socialist country, it was a statement that was, it was very advanced. I mean, no one has really talked about it, but we're seeing it creep into the national discussion. We're seeing it creep into the laws. We're seeing candidates, even candidates running for president, who are socialists. Do you think that the average American is concerned about socialism? Or do they think it's just, it can't happen here?
They sure ought to be, because you have people, as you're saying, running on a socialist platform. I think the problem is that there are so many people in this country that do not fully understand what socialism means and what it would mean for this country. Janine, let me name a few countries for you that these people might know, and we're all socialist countries. The USSR, China, Cuba, most recently Venezuela, where people are starving to death, eating dog and cat food to survive. It's something that every American should really take seriously. This is almost full government control of everything. Here we have a president who is deregulating things, taking the government out of most things, and you see our country thriving. You see the economy booming. These people want to do the opposite. They want government to control essentially everything. It's a step away from communism and a dictatorship in some senses. It's very serious. It's very scary. And if you don't fully understand it, do some research. We do not want socialism happening in the United States of America. Our founding fathers would be rolling over in their grave if they knew that these people were serious and they were really running on these platforms, and they are. That's the scariest part.
And they are, and they're openly running on it. Anyway, Laura Trump, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.